Today is December 5th, 2025, and we are going to be discussing the ongoing conflict between Israel and Gaza. And presently, the ceasefire is still in place. It has been violated several hundred times. Both sides have been guilty of violating the ceasefire. It's not too much of a surprise. But specifically, what we're going to be talking about today is the removal of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. It's not really getting too much coverage. And basically, we're in a situation right now where the ceasefire is entering its second phase. The first phase, involved a couple of different elements, but specifically that was the return of the hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli jails. Now, there's the final remains, the remains of the final hostage were sent back to Israel, and Israel said that they didn't match, the records that they had on place. They were basically saying that the remains were not the correct remains. However, they are still planning to proceed with the second phase of the ceasefire, which involves opening up the Rafah crossing. Now, when this crossing is opened up, we're going to get into the story in a second, but many of the sick and the injured within the Gaza Strip will have the privilege of going into Egypt to get treatment. However, they will not be allowed to re-enter the Gaza Strip. And so I think this is part of an overarching strategy to, on the one hand, provide humanitarian aid to the injured and the sick in the Gaza Strip, but also remove them, which was the original plan that we heard the Trump administration announce at the beginning of the year when he was discussing turning Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East. So there's the opening of the Rafah crossing that we'll be discussing, but there's also another initiative that's taking place, and this involves the Israeli military over the course of the past couple of months, and they've evacuated over 40,000 people to different countries. They've evacuated over 40,000 Palestinians into different countries. And so I think this is all part of an overarching strategy that's quietly developing of removing a significant element of the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. So just some notes on this ceasefire before we get into the main story here. To date, the ceasefire that was supposed to be in effect, it's still in effect, but it's been violated several times, several hundred times. The IDF has killed to date about 339 Palestinians and wounded about 871. And latest deaths, if these deaths are confirmed, which many of them have been, would bring the total number of Palestinians killed after the ceasefire up to about 343. And I believe on the Israeli side, they've lost, I think, 3 or 4 of their IDF personnel. And so it's been violated several hundred times, and a lot of the violations, they've taken place, but you see these violations of the ceasefire, but also you see in conjunction with that their presence in the Gaza Strip that's still maintained on the Green Line. And so right now they hold about, I believe it's 47% of the Gaza Strip, and there's a Green Line that's basically cutting the Gaza Strip in half. And it's supposed to be a security parameter. And there are Palestinians behind the Green Line, but it's a very minuscule amount. Most of them are beyond the Green Line, and that little piece of sliver of land that the Palestinians have and Hamas still occupies, it braces up against the ocean. And so many of the fatalities that have taken place over the course of the ceasefire have been because Palestinians have wandered up to the Green Line, or in some cases crossed the Green Line, which isn't, in some places clearly marked. And so many of these people who are going up to the Green Line or crossing it are losing their lives. And so that's where a lot of these casualties are coming in. And so jumping into the story here, this is from AP. This again is, regarding the reopening of the border at Rafah. It was closed when the Israeli army invaded Rafah, and so that last year, it was closed to aid, the crossings, back and forth, and It's just been recently reopened, again initiating the second phase of the ceasefire. So this is again from AP. Israel on Wednesday said it will start letting Palestinians leave Gaza through a reopened border crossing. Now, this goes back to the remains of the hostages that we were talking about. It's actually two hostages. Apologies for that mistake. The missing remains of two hostages threatened to stall the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in the first phase. But by promising to open the Rafah crossing, Israel showed it's moving ahead with parts of the plan. So the first phase of the plan was supposed to wind down with the return of the two remaining hostages. And following the exchanges, the 20-point plan calls for creating an international stabilization force, and we discussed that when we broke down each point of the ceasefire. And this stabilization force would form a technocratic Palestinian government and disarm Hamas. Now, Hamas has already basically said they aren't laying down their arms, as we discussed in that video. But also, we really don't have too much of an outline right now, or a sketch of what this international stabilization force is supposed to look like, which countries are supposed to contribute to forming it, how are Palestinians going to play into it, how can this entity be viable if Hamas is still operating in the Gaza Strip. Many of these questions still haven't been answered, but I'm sure that it's going to trickle out, just like, any of the other agreements that have been signed between or ceasefires that have been brokered over the past couple of years between Israel and Hamas. So, article goes on. The World Health Organization says there are more than 16,500 sick and wounded people who need to leave Gaza for medical care. The statement about opening Rafah came from Kogat, the Israeli military body charged with facilitating aid to Gaza. It said Israel would coordinate with Egypt on the exit of Palestinians under the supervision of a mission from the European Union. And this mission has yet to be formed, and so the EU is going to form a mission that's going to help facilitate the exit of the sick and the wounded from the Gaza Strip. It says those wishing to leave Gaza will require Israeli security approval, Kogat said. The ceasefire deal calls for the crossing to be open for medical evacuations and for travel to and from the Strip. But an Israeli official who spoke anonymously to discuss operational plans said that all Palestinians who want to exit Gaza will be able to exit through Rafah as long as Egypt agrees to receive them, but the crossing won't be open for people wishing to return. And so that, key sentence is definitely the key to all of this. So essentially, they're going to be facilitating the exit or ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians that are at this stage sick and wounded, right? They're going to facilitate the exit through the Rafah crossing into Egypt if Egypt agrees to receive them, which will likely take place. I'm sure that they will be taking a certain percentage of them. After all, they have been training. It's been low key, but I have read that they've been training security personnel to re-enter Gaza should this ceasefire continue. I believe the security personnel they're training are Palestinians. I believe Jordanians as well. So we'll see how that develops in the future. But ultimately, this is basically part of Israel's larger plan, the Greater Israel Project, removing the Palestinian element from the Gaza Strip and maintaining control of the already taken territory from Gaza, right? Which is ironic because if you remember when the war started, months into the war, Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, said we have no intention of reoccupying or wanting to take back the Gaza Strip. We don't want to have anything to do with it, but as we know, they will have much to do with it. They're likely not going to be removing themselves from that green line. And if you remember, whenever we went over the points of the ceasefire, they are supposed to be in phases moving their military further back to the original parameter that they established around the Gaza Strip as there's progress in the ceasefire. So strongly doubt that that's going to happen. And there probably won't be much of a need to when you consider, again, that they're beginning to facilitate the removal of the Palestinians And we know that, again, that's part of the larger plan that Trump talked about earlier this year, getting rid of them, removing them to different parts of the world. It would, of course, be voluntary, but it's removing them, rebuilding, and maybe using some small element of them to, administer whatever business ventures that are placed within the Gaza Strip. So it's something that could have easily been missed because a lot of people have shifted their attention to the ongoing diplomacy in Ukraine and, of course, domestic issues in the U.S. But this is happening at it's a gradual pace, and it's happening beneath the radar right now. But it's something that is important to focus on because the cleansing is happening before our eyes. The removal of the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip is happening. And this ties into another story that I had come across, and it dovetails perfectly with it. And this is regarding flights that have been leaving Israel with Palestinians over the past couple of months. And this isn't under the pretext of the ceasefire that took place. So we'll get into this article. Israel's military says more than 40,000 people have left the enclave since the start of the war in 2023. Typically for medical care or because they are dual citizens, and in either case are subject to formal requests from a third country, a major hurdle in an arduous process. So 40,000 people since 2023 have left the Strip. Now Gazans desperate to leave had found a way out via a little-known organization called Al-Majid Europe. Al-Majid holds itself out as an Arab charity founded in Germany and located in East Jerusalem. But its website doesn't list an office address or a phone number, and the Wall Street Journal couldn't locate any records of it existing in East Jerusalem or being registered in Germany. Its website said it takes donations only via cryptocurrency. So you have this organization that was founded in Germany, based out of East Jerusalem, that's facilitating the removal of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. People in Gaza, and this is from the Wall Street Journal in case anyone was wondering, people in Gaza began seeing ads for Al-Majid earlier this year, promising a route to safe evacuation if they click the embedded link. The group has flown nearly 400 people out on 3 flights. People who took the flight said. The first in May took travelers to Hungary, then onward to either Malaysia, Indonesia, or South Africa. Final destinations where Palestinians can travel visa-free or get a visa on arrival. The second flight in October went to Kenya and South Africa, just as the November flight did. And this story also contained the story of a young girl who was studying abroad, college-age student who was studying abroad, and she was kind of confused because her flight, I believe it went first to, I'm not going to say Sudan, but it went to Kenya. I believe it went first to Kenya and then to South Africa. And I think she was routed to Egypt to be with her family because her family had already left. And by the way, if I said that 40,000 people were removed under this program, the Al-Majid program, it's actually so far this year 400. The 40,000 is what has left the Gaza Strip since the war started, as the article indicates. Just to clean that up there. Now, Gazans said they registered for the trips through the link online, after which they were put through a security screening and added to a WhatsApp group. People who traveled on the first flight said they paid nothing, but those on the second said they paid $1,400 at the cost, and the cost was up to double that for the third. And what's interesting about the flights is that if they are charging that kind of money to get these flights from the Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip, you have to wonder, which ones, right? And so all of this is kind of, tying into what we were talking about earlier with, the Rafah crossing and the removal of the 16,000 people that are injured or sick or whatever to Egypt. This dovetails perfectly with the whole, removal component that we're seeing unfold here. It could be determined, the article goes on, it couldn't be determined how al-Majid is funded and what it hopes to achieve. It is connected to the Voluntary Migration Administration, an official inside Israel's IDF, Israel's defense ministry that helps Palestinians leave Gaza. People familiar with the matter said. And so that's, of course, the critical part. It is connected to the Voluntary Migration Administration, and this is connected to the Israeli government. And so that's basically what we're seeing unfolding here. It's a low-key effort, albeit low in scale for right now. It's a low-key effort to basically cleanse the strip of the remaining Palestinians living there. I wouldn't doubt that within the next couple of months and next year that these kinds of organizations multiply and that more people are removed without the option to return. The article continues, the ministry set up the office this year after President Trump proposed removing Palestinians from the enclave while it was rebuilt as an international tourist destination. The proposal set off concern the Palestinians can be forced to leave the enclave or depart voluntarily under conditions that left them no real choice. So you just figure that most of them, obviously, when it comes to, aid is coming back into the strip, so that's been a positive, albeit it's at a trickle. It's not nearly enough to satisfy the needs of the people that are there that have been subject to these 3 years of war. But you're talking about sanitation issues, you're talking about, the rubble and, felled buildings. You're talking about, the continued operation of Hamas in the enclave, but also the IDF. A very difficult situation, and obviously many of them will have no choice but to leave, right? And so, like I just said earlier, I truly believe that organizations like this are going to be proliferating more, probably working hand in glove with the GHF organization that we talked about in videos earlier this year, the organization that was helping to facilitate humanitarian aid to the Palestinians. They're probably going to be working hand in glove with organizations like this to remove many of the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip to help Israel realize the Greater Israel Project and, potentially start settling the Gaza Strip as they're doing in the West Bank. The West Bank is basically a war zone right now. The expansion of settlements are off the charts, and that, again, the violence and everything that we're seeing over there, it's not stopping people from uprooting and going in, settling, right? So the issue is complicated. However, as many Palestinians don't want to stay in Gaza, the article says, where they lack real housing, sanitation, and reliable access to food. So 3 years of warfare has basically created the circumstances where, again, they aren't able to function and live, even in, temporary dwellings until everything is rebuilt. Because we don't know when the rebuilding is even going to start, right? So Israel's military said it has eased its screening process for people seeking to leave Gaza, and that the rate of security approvals has risen substantially. So they're making it easy for them to leave. It's very likely that they will not be coming back. So there you have it. The scale is something I fully expect to increase, as I said earlier, and the administration and Israel government obviously need the territory. The remaining Palestinians are living on to bring the beachhead, the Riviera idea to fruition, right? Which was interesting, the way that they carved it up. They carved up the Gaza Strip because I would assume that the reason that they did it the way they did, and the green line is where it is because I suppose that it's the land closest to the ocean that Hamas is. I guess that's where they're concentrated, right? You would have thought that if they wanted to start building this Trump's Riviera, that they would have tried to occupy at least the ocean front, but that's not the case. But there you have it. That's the point this is something that we'll be following pretty closely and probably doing follow-up videos as more information starts to come out. But we are seeing Israel begin the removal of Palestinians. We have over, say, 80,000 that have been killed since the war has started. And now we're going to start seeing scores, hundreds, and then thousands of them being removed from the Strip. It's not going to be forcible. It's not going to be the sensational thing that many people think it's going to be, but it's going to be quietly carried out. That's what we're going to see from the Trump administration. I don't think that he was bluffing when he said he wanted this idea to come to fruition of, cleansing the strip with Bibi Netanyahu and, building resorts there. So that'll do it for us today. We'll see you next time.